hello and welcome. Happy Monday to Leaders and Legacy in Style, the divine masculine and the divine feminine. I am Joy Ruffin, your mentor, your minister of enlightenment, awareness, and awakenings. Oh, I also work as a leadership and signature style specialist, and every Monday I bring to you a featured guest speaker. This month, my League of Eagles is Reigning Men. All of my featured guest speakers were leaders and legacy and style this month. They're men. And today we have Dr. Robert Ott, a positive psychologist, a practitioner, professor, a business consultant, an accomplished author with over a decade of experience. I have known this handsome guy for quite a while. We're old friends. You know, it's a love fest here all the time. He's passionate about cultivating dynamic, high-performing teams, both remotely and in person. Now, I could go on and on and on. You know I can. But I want you just to sit back, relax, and help me welcome. He's Dr. Robert Ott, but you can call him Robert. Dr. Robert Ott, as they say in the telly, come on up and welcome.
Hi, Joey.
How are you doing? It's so good to have you.
Well.
That's good. It's great to have you here because, you know, psychology is one of my favorite subjects. You don't have to ask me why. I think you might know. But tell me, before we get going here, very briefly, how did you come to being a doctor of psychology? Positive psychology is how I like it.
Well, that's a really fascinating question. You know, when you think about the breadth and the depth of psychology, let's start off with a definition that brings all the various constitutional parts of psychology together. So let's start by saying that we all exist simultaneously on multiple levels. We exist at the subatomic level, the atomic level, then there's the level of the molecular. We also exist at the level of the body, the level of the organs, and we have various systems for perception, systems for cognitive, also motivational systems, and we have systems that can basically understand our external environments, process deeply, and understand it in a way that makes sense cognitively. And if you look at all those subordinate levels that I just mentioned, right up into the individual mind, then we are finally in a domain of psychology. Now, where we separate from the domain of positive psychology, for example, is when we can finally compartmentalize human problems and also start to put ourselves in an understanding of how we can place ourselves in environments by using very specific things like resiliency, meaningful and value living, for example, and how to convert, PTSD into post-traumatic growth. Then we can really start to have a good conversation about positive psychology, because the reality is, Joy, most people will never be in a position where they are clinically in need of therapists. Most of us, though, with the problems and issues that we do have, which are not clinical, we need a different forum that allows us to thrive and really start to capture the essence of the human existence. I hope that's a pretty well-rounded understanding of it.
Well, my friend, that was very detailed and very to the point, and I like it. I also like to go to the basic bottom line. And what you said, and one of the reasons that I'm so attracted and loving the work that you do, is you have that word in front of psychology, positive, because that's the end result. That's what you're doing. But you let another seed fly out there. You said most people, or did I hear you say this? Confirm with me back. Did I hear you say that most people don't need or won't go for a psychologist, but they're looking for a way to, how did you phrase that? Because something about that stuck. I didn't quite get it though.
Yeah, let me clarify that. And you heard it correctly, and let me articulate that again.
Please, briefly.
Most people will not be in need of a clinical psychologist because they won't warrant that diagnostic from the Diagnostic Statistical Manual, which is in its 5th edition. However, most of the population, including myself and you, will be in need of ways to get us to thrive with the human condition in a way that allows us to appreciate every moment of our existence and live out the best version of ourselves.
I love that description because when you said most of us in need of, I get it. Because I like the expression, Roberts, most of us, some of us, many of us, because it's never really all of us. And in need of, and how we come to that. I get it. I understand it. How have you taken this and taken it into a positive balance for life's demands with our emotional intelligence, our depression, how we're using so many substance abuse, suicide, divorce? How do you add the positive touch to that for the masses, however you're working or connecting with them? I don't know how that works for you.
Well, I think one thing that comes up is, most people always say post-traumatic stress disorder.
Yes.
Somebody is always suffering from some type of traumatic event that they can't let go of in the past. And what I'm about to say is not to marginalize that experience, but what I am about to say is that even suffering has its place. Even suffering can allow you to feel that your existence has value and meaning. So there's an existential truth that comes out of the very suffering and crisis that most of us will go through. How we frame it and how we grow as a result of it is another question. So out of that traumatic event, which people usually like to label PTSD, you can have post-traumatic growth as a result of it. But the post-traumatic growth doesn't usually manifest itself for a period of time. That period of time allows some level of introspection that takes place that has a transformational effect on people. And for me, certainly a spiritual component to it that allows you to embrace the very suffering that you wish never actually occurred, because it changes you on the most micro level possible, and it changes your way of thinking, and it also allows you to reframe these painful experiences. So now you're in a position of growth. And when you're in a position of growth, and when you're in a leadership position, for example, and you're starting to take on responsibility in the community, and then you start to realize that I can shoulder a greater deal of responsibility, and as a result of that, it changes the very moral fiber in your being. And now you become a beacon of hope, a light of hope, which I think you used the word enlightenment earlier.
Yes.
In your community. And it can have that transformational effect on individuals that just can't let go. That doesn't mean that everybody will experience that, but for people where they're at that margin where they could be clinical, but they're not, this is a great prescription to suffering. Embrace it. There's an existential value that comes out of this. And you see that written across the literature when it comes to Nietzsche, or it comes to Frankl, or it comes to Dostoevsky, or, even Tolstoy, War and Peace has moments where he talks. I mean, I think you said last time that you read Crime and Punishment early, like when you were 15, 16, that blows my mind away. But nevertheless, there's these nuggets of truth that these great writers say, and there's no mistake when Sigmund Freud says that he believes that the first true psychologist was Fyodor Dostoevsky, even though he wasn't trained to be, but he understood the human condition. I'll stop there for a moment.
Robert, you're on fire, and I love it. Let me say that your description back to me, and I'm sure for those who are tuning in now and for the replay, when you brought up post-traumatic stress, and then you added to it post-traumatic growth, even in the suffering, because I take things to the basic bottom line, foundational, and I say even in the most traumatic period, transitional periods of one's life, there's a beacon of light at the end of that tunnel. And our assignment in that evolving and growth is to find it. And you just said it in a whole different way, but that's the base bottom line as I see it. Am I far off on that?
No, you're not far off. And if you want, I'll give you two anecdotal examples. If you look at Friedrich Nietzsche, for example, he uses the word why and how. Now that's important to understand why and how.
Yes.
If you can identify your source of suffering, you can endure any how to overcome it. And then this is taken to a different level by Viktor Frankl, who believed very strongly in God, whereas Nietzsche, as you probably already know, was an atheist. But there's always value from even atheists, as you know, because they provide a great deal of insight. But nevertheless, Viktor Frankl in Man's Search for Meaning, he talks about his experience in Auschwitz before he was transferred to Dachau. And when he was finally too strong to die in Auschwitz, they sent him to Dachau. And he lived out his days there until he was finally liberated. But one of the things that he realized is that when he was walking through that gate, he sees Abat macht frei, work may set you free, basically, is what that's transcribed to. And for Viktor Frankl, I think that was a starting point for him to understand how to reframe the suffering in a camp like that and understand his interaction with people. And although he was not being employed, and although he wasn't being given a paycheck, and he was removed from the very books and intellect that he's become accustomed to, what he did have was community. There was a culture of Jewish people in there that developed a community. And he was able to develop afterwards, and this started to form and frame out during his stay there, logotherapy, which is basically an existential understanding of the crisis of suffering. And basically, what he says there is that, and it goes back to something I said early on, because it really resonates with me. Right. For the people that were able to engage in their community, and it's something I wrote in a journal, you know, those who were able to engage in their community well, let me reframe it differently. People that were not able to engage in their community while staying in the camp were unwilling to shoulder any responsibility to any of their comrades. And that's a specific word he uses. Yes. As a result of that, they gave up morally, which meant I can't care about my neighbor and I can't care about myself. Let me just come.
Yes. I love this. But, you know, you bringing up three basic foundational pieces for me and for you too. I don't have to ask. I know it's first family, and then it's relationships, and then it's community. But you said something earlier. We're going to take a little reset. I want to make sure that I heard this, because I must have fallen in love with Dostoevsky. Maybe I was 13, 14, 15 years old, the oldest. And you said something about Freud said he was the first psychologist or something like that. That's profound. Say that again.
Yeah, I came across some literature, and for some reason, I think it was recently when I was reading maybe Jordan Peterson, We Who Wrestle with God. I'm going to credit Peterson because I know I got it from somewhere, and that's a book I'm diving deep into right now. Okay. And I think that's where he discloses that Freud believed that Dostoevsky was really the first psychologist, although not trained, because he understood the human condition very deeply.
Yes, the human condition. I find that fascinating because I fell in love with Dostoevsky and I read everything that he read. But by the way, I get excited. I can't help it. It's in my DNA, and yours too. You're on fire and so am I. I'm going to take a quick little reset, introduce the audience to a couple of things, then I'm coming back. And when I come back, I want us to talk about culture and current political situation without getting too deep into it. And then we're going to wind this up, and I have a couple of questions for you. So hold tight. Don't go anywhere. Woo! Isn't it exciting, my friends? Because when I said in the beginning, it's raining men here, well, aren't we about the divine masculine and the divine feminine? And we're about equalizing and finding the harmony and the balance now. If you are not a member of my Leading Ladies Leaving Legacies Facebook group, then please join. Robert has a favorite lady, I'm sure, and I'm going to ask him to ask her to join, or I will ask her myself, because we're all about your vision, your mission, and your purpose. It's all about coming together as a community and building a structure, a foundation together that's all about collaboration. That said, I now have a YouTube channel. Connect with me there. Go there. We are doing one a week, but there are lots of other videos there as well. And subscribe, because we want to build. And as we build this community, my Facebook, Fashioning Femininity, Style, and Truth, we're going to invite you to come in so that we can do more one-on-one interactions with each other. And if you are not that familiar with Robert, Dr. Robert Ott, PhD, you're going to get his practical approach to life satisfaction. Take a screenshot, take a snapshot, and take yourself to a one-on-one meeting with Robert. And then you will find his practical approach to life satisfactions is never ending and always eye-opening. So that, my friends, a screenshot or snapshot. And I'm going to go back now and meet with Robert. Robert, we're both on fire here today. And I love that we are, because your work excites me. I think I told you my sister was a psychologist.
You did.
And yeah. And she got 2 master's degrees, and then she went for the PhD. Now, I didn't go in that direction, but she and I had the juiciest conversations, as you and I always have. So I love the work that you're doing. Tell us a little bit about what you feel about the meaning of life and how we're tying that in, without getting too political, with the current political circle that we're in. Woohoo, that's a biggie.
You know, the meaning of life is going to be a very subjective term for a lot of people.
Yes, indeed.
And we have to understand what is somebody's meaning in life, what is their truth. And I just want to draw attention to self-determinism theory in psychology, because it talks about intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. It's about motivation, what compels people to do things. And one of the things that it says is that if we're always focused, as far as a matrix is concerned, on external validators like power and wealth, these individuals tend to have the lowest subjective well-being. Whereas individuals that can internalize information or are intrinsically motivated to do things because they have higher competence and they also have more autonomy, which means more independence, they tend to focus more on the quality of relationships and also personal development. And they tend to have the higher degree of subjective well-being. Now, these types of things are important. And maybe one of the things that we could look at from a social policy perspective is, why is it that countries like Norway, for example, in the northern region of Europe, have the highest degree of life satisfaction? And there was a study that appears in one of my books. And when they measured life satisfaction across 26 countries, and it doesn't actually state which countries, but you'll get the premise. It says Chile in South America had the highest degree of satisfaction in life, whereas Spain and also Belarus has the lowest. Now, if you look historically at Belarus, for example, and even Spain, somewhere around 1973 is when Francisco Franco finally passed on. And with that, you saw early on the monarchy was already reinstalled, I believe, maybe sometime in the 50s. But nevertheless, they didn't have control and power. But after Franco finally succumbed to life, the democracy really started to develop. Now, there's an incubation period there. And as a result of that, Spain is still in that infancy when it comes to democracy. And I think that's one of the reasons why Spain historically is showing low levels of satisfaction. You look at Belarus, the Iron Curtain on the Eastern Bloc, as Churchill famously said, didn't fall down until 1989, and in some cases it was even 1991 as it went down each Eastern Bloc state. And Belarus is no exception there. So as a result of this, you've got communist rule, you've got culture being suppressed, you've got creativity at an all-time low, you have low access to health care, you've got people fearful every day. Did I say the right thing? Did I not say the right thing? Am I going to get a knock at the door? And, they should be scared, because it wasn't until, let's just say, from about 1919 when the Soviet Union finally put a plan in action about what the gulags would be like. And it wasn't until Solzhenitsyn talked about it elegantly and crudely, for that matter, and rightfully so, in the Gulag Archipelago, that the archipelago didn't actually fall apart until 1957, several years after Stalin's death, when the camps were finally, I don't want to use the word outlawed, but I will say they were finally dismantled.
Yes.
I think there's an element of that unlawfulness there.
Let me ask you something, Robert. I received everything that you just shared with us there, and I concur and agree, and I can align with it. Do you feel life isn't sometimes fair, but it is beautiful? Do you feel that maybe here in the States that that feeling of unsettled and uncertainty and not feeling safe, do you feel, not because you're in another generation, but do you think it's more prevalent now reading back from the beginning of time in history up until now? Or is it just our time to have that feeling now?
I think there is an element where many people feel that way.
Yeah.
It's difficult to want to speak honestly and openly at your employers. I'm working at 3 different institutions in education, and because of reprisal, I'm very well aware of that. And as an individual, I would be fearful to express some of my feelings because of all the persecution that we have seen over the last 10 years, for example.
Yes.
But people being maybe too conservative in their thoughts, and now it's too liberal in their thoughts, and so forth. And I also,
Robert, I think that was in the makings before the pandemic, but since the pandemic, and then with AI becoming so permeating the whole society, I think it's more prevalent now. I think
so. And we should be scared, and we need to figure out a way to curtail AI. And AI's got a lot of utility, don't get me wrong.
Oh, yes,
but you can clearly see how it could be used for malcontent purposes. Right. And it could be very dangerous for society. So these concerns are real. And I think what is different today than it was, generations ago. Yes. The Nazis, for example, were great at disinformation. During the time of Julius Caesar, the same thing. This is nothing new. Just read Sun Tzu's Art of War, and you'll see it play out right there. What is different is the way we use technology to amplify those messages that have the potential to go to all 4 corners of the world with great efficacy. And that's why we should be scared.
Well, you know what they say, and it ties into what you're saying in a different way, but it's the same thing. Everything old is new again. So everything repeats itself at some point in time. I have to tell you, you and I could go on and on and on, and yet I know that there's a lot of things in the making for you. So share with us in the minutes that we have left, and we have a few, what are you working on? Because we can already tell all of us that you're consumed by the work that you're doing and that you're really more than excelling in it. But what's new on the agenda? What's coming up? What is something you want to share with us that you want to talk about?
Well, I will share something with you that I recently started this past July. Well, 2 things. I'm working on 2 books.
Woohoo!
I'm working on a novella, which is going to have like a moral theme that ties nihilism into meaning from an existential perspective. And that's because of all my reading between, like Albert Camus, and then we've got Nietzsche, and then we've got Fyodor Dostoevsky, and then we've got others to mention as well. But that's one thing that I just put aside. I've been working on it, and I decided to put that aside for a non-fictional piece that I'm working on, and I'm almost done with chapter 1. And that's taken up a lot of my time. And I start this process at 3:00 in the morning. That's when I actually start. And because there's a lot of reading and research that goes into it. So the title of the book, strangely enough, I came up with the title before I actually started writing it. But it's called The Silence Before the Rubicon. And the story takes place based on Caesar's marching his 13th Legion from Gaul into Italy by crossing the Rubicon. So I'm going to talk about the physical, the spiritual effects from it, and so forth. I'm tracing back motivation, because economics is a great motivator for people's behavior, and Caesar's certainly no exception. So this is the big piece that I'm working on right now. I'm hoping it'll be done within a year, but that might be a little bit too.
You mentioned the moral theme, and what because I always say in my talks and my conversations, somehow we need to get more in alignment, not knocking a big negative with our moral compass. So what is the moral theme that you'll have in this novella that you're putting together in the other book?
Well, with the novella, what I imagine is I want to really dive deep into nihilism and try to come up with a meta truth from an existential perspective that gives us an understanding of why suffering makes sense and how we can actually embody the meaning that could evolve as a direct outgrowth of that experience. And one of the other things too, we live in a time where atheism is so popular, and that's no coincidence, because we have Luciferian thought taking place. We also recognize that people have abandoned moral principles and moral precepts from the church. And as a result of that, you've got people thinking, well, what is the purpose of life? I don't understand it because I reject religion and all of the moral precepts that come with it. And I have to remind people, when Nietzsche did that, eventually he lost his mind. So that might be a little foreshadowing right there.
Whoa. I tell you, this is so exciting. Listen, before we say so long for now, because it is only for now, tell us about that great, handsome looking guy that's at your back there on the right side, Marcus Aurelius. Tell us why you're so as mesmerized by him.
Yeah.
Share with us.
I'll start by saying that he's Rome's philosopher emperor, and for good reason. If you've ever read Meditations, I've read it twice already, and it's just such a good piece of work because he never intended it to be released to the public. He wrote it as he was traveling through the Danube with his legionaries, conquering neighboring regions and thinking about various things that take place through these idyllic villages. And he was a pretty fair and equitable emperor. And, one thing that caught me with Meditations, many things, but one thing that always stands out, and I write about this in my previous book that you highlighted earlier, he says that Rome is the mother of crime, or poverty is the mother of crime, which ties right into Rome because of the policies that they have in place that favor the aristocratic class and the people that were basically praetors or commoners, as you can, of course, call them. He started thinking about policies that could be beneficial for them. And he's interesting. So when I think about somebody that's worthy to be on that Ionic pedestal right there, it's certainly Aurelius, because he embodies what true leadership is. Leadership is not about acting out on every whim. It's about being reasonable and acting with deterministic moral. I don't want to use the word superiority, but I just said it. But with a moral compass that drives your behavior. In other words, I think Aurelius was a good steward for the people.
You know what? I'm sorry, Rob, but you're using the word that I really love. He embodied for you and for most of us what leadership is all about. Now, I have a new platform that I'm using here somewhat. I'm going to ask you, we're ending up here now. But before I ask you what your pearls of wisdom might be in the takeaway, I'm going to ask you, how do you align divine femininity style and equality with your leadership style? Because you spoke to Marcus Aurelius and his leadership style, how it embodied the essence of what it is. So how would you address that question?
So the divine femininity, one thing comes to mind, Joy, because I realize how modest you are when you dress, and yet you embody femininity. Women need to be taught, girls, adolescents need to be taught not to over-sexualize their bodies. When you go out, they can't appear like they're going to a gym or going to a beach. They need to basically dress with grace, sophistication, if they want anybody to take them seriously.
You just roll right into my ballpark, and I love it. Robert, it's always fun. You and I could go on and on and on, but what takeaway do you want to leave the audience with? What pearls of wisdom? What do you want us to walk away with here today? You've given us so much, and thank you.
The soul becomes dyed with the color of your thoughts, Marcus Aurelius. If we understand how our thoughts can affect our soul, we will be more cautious about how we behave and how we think.
Woo, thank you. Thank you. My engineer is going to shoot you into the green room, but I just loved our time together. I can't wait to hear the replay. Thank you, Robert. Thank you. Whew. I have to say that it's always a pleasure. This is the beginning of a fabulous week. It's Monday. So make sure that you make the best of every day and take away some of those pearls of wisdom that Dr. Robert Ott left us with. And then when you replay this or listen to it again, you'll find lots of gems there, lots of pearls that you'll be able to utilize. Friends, my League of Eagles, it's always my pleasure to share time and space with you. From my heart to yours, always much, much love and all the best. Have a great week. Cheers.